Hi, all. Welcome to Cloud Native Live for today, Wednesday, July 17th. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, a Cloud Native Ambassador, and I am excited to introduce our speakers today, Jakob and Oz. But before we start, I just want to note Cloud Native Live is this opportunity we all have pretty much every week and sometimes multiple times a week to be able to dive into the tech behind Cloud Native. We get to see demos and basically the classic saying of how the sausage is made from a lot of different people across the industry. It is a CNCF event here, so as it is a CNCF event, it is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which basically boils down to be respectful and nice to each other. So please keep your comments and things in the different chat channels respectful, and feel free to ask questions. We'll make sure those questions get to our speakers. So I will let them introduce themselves and get started. So welcome.
Hey, my name is Jakob. I work for Stacklog, which is a company that deals in supply chain security. And before that, I spent quite a few years at Red Hat doing OpenShift security and compliance and identity management before that.
And hey, everybody, my name is Juan Antonio Osorio. People call me Oz. It's a little bit easier to pronounce. And yeah, I also work for Stacklog, hence the shirt is not fashion. Kind of it is. It's a nice shirt. And I used to be in the same team as Jakob, actually. So we know from Red Hat times.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get right into your demos and presentation and stuff. I believe, Jakob, you were going to go ahead and start us off with some demos, I believe, right?
Right, so I'm going to just set the stage a bit. So the thing that we're going to show is called Frisbee, and Frisbee is both a library and a CLI that we built around it. And the thing that Frisbee does is that you give it a tag for something like a GitHub action or a container image typically. And Frisbee would fetch the corresponding SHA for that tag and bring it back to you. And Frisbee was born out of like a real need that we have, because what we do in our day-to-day job is this thing called Minder that lets you write security policies around your repos. And one policy that we had was built on an actual like GitHub security recommendation, which says that if you're using actions, especially third-party actions, you should pin them to a SHA, because this is the only way that you can make sure that the code that you are running is what you think it is. It's the only way to make an immutable reference to the action. And so we built this profile, and it told us when we deployed it ourselves as kind of dogfooding, it told us that you're not using pinned actions, you're using tags. But to go from those failures to actually like remediating them to start using the SHAs, that was actually hard. Like there was no other way except us going one by one across all the actions that we use at Stacklog in our repos, manually checking what is the corresponding SHA for the tag and then filling it in the workflows. And so Oz, who is a serial project starter, had this idea that we should write a new software for this. And instead of building this into Minder, we created Frisbee, which is a separate project. And so now I can go to the demo. And I chose for the demo, Trivia Operator by Aqua Security for no particular reason. The only reason was that it's a project that's used. It has a reasonable amount of stars, like I think a couple of K. And if we look at the workflows that they are using, you can see that, just going to look at maybe this one. You see that they use a fair amount of actions, and all the actions are referenced by a tag, right? Like here, Sixtor cosine installer 350. And if you want to conform to the GitHub security recommendations, we would have to find out what the corresponding SHAs are and rewrite the workflows, or we can use Frisbee. And doing that like pinning the actions to SHAs with Frisbee is where was it? Frisbee actions is about as easy, if you are not like me and can type, as running Frisbee actions and then pointing it to the directory of the Git checkout where we have your project. So I'm going to run this command. And there's a bunch of lines printed, but basically what they say to you is that Frisbee processed a bunch of workflow files and modified some of them. And then if we go back to the trivia operator checkout and do a git diff, we see that the actions are now pinned. And there's even this helpful command that Frisbee puts after the expanded, the pinned action that tracks the version that was pinned. So you see that we pinned 3.0.0 to some wildly looking SHA, but we know that that's 3.0.0. And except for pinning, the other thing that Frisbee CLI can do for you is just listing the actions, which, right. So now if we list the actions, we see that all of them, except those that use master, that's an exception we make, are pinned. And listing the actions is something that's surprisingly useful for security as well, because you might want to, having an inventory is good in itself, right? You might want to know what your project is using and depending on. But you might also want to categorize the actions and say that, okay, these actions are only allowed in workflows that have certain permission set, or these are not allowed at all. So listing and pinning is the basic use case you can do with Frisbee as a CLI. I think that's the shortest rounded demo I can do. Oops.
All right. And just to add a little bit to what Jacob said, right? So we were looking at specific GitHub recommendations and trying to come up with something that would be a little bit less painful than going through the UI and copy commits or going to the repo. But also one thing from experience is that for containers, there are very similar recommendations, right? So ideally, you should not be using floating tags, because those are not immutable. You can overwrite them. So instead, what you want to do is pin to the SHA of the container, a content addressable checksum of your container, which gives you similar properties, right? You know exactly what you're deploying, and it also gives you some integrity, right? So we thought, you know what, we're already building this for GitHub Actions. We might as well do something very similar for containers, because we can, and why not, right? So the thing that I'm going to show is Frisbee doing exactly the same thing, but for containers, right? So now going to my screen, let's see.
Hold on, I'm clicking the button for you. There you
it's
go.
all good. Sorry about that. I should have been a bit more specific. But okay, so now I have a little demo directory, if you want to call it that way. And what I'd like to show is all the things that Frisbee is able to actually remediate, fix, or pin for you. All right. So a very basic scenario, your Docker Compose files, right? So you can see a lot of people use Docker Compose, and you're going to have a bunch of containers there with their images, right? So you want to make sure that you're using something that you approve of, right? So Frisbee to the rescue, if you want to call it that. So Frisbee image compose, variamo, here we go. Go Frisbee, go. And as you can see, Frisbee tells you exactly, or replaces exactly what it should be doing with a nice little comment over here. So you don't have to reason about this weird looking text over here, right? You actually know what it's spinning towards. As Jacob mentioned as well, we can list things that are available in your manifests, right? Because not everything is as easy as that. I've seen some really hairy YAML out there, so Frisbee does that for you. It's mostly for you not to have to worry about it. I am a very lazy person. I don't want to think about it. I just want something else to do it for me. We're able to do this for, wait, Frisbee, Kubernetes manifest as well, right? A lot of people are using Kubernetes, at least in StackLog we do as well. And this can get really hairy too, right? All sorts of different types. They have all sorts of indentations and they can look terrifying, right? So don't sweat it. Let Frisbee help you out. Something as follows, right? If you want to do something a little bit hairier, such as something with several containers, right? Image deploy number2.yaml. Frisbee is going to do that for you as well, right? So it's just trying to show the flexibility that we try to give because we're lazy. We don't want to do things manually. And finally, Docker containers, right? Little did you know that you also have to pin these ones, right? Not only the thing that you're deploying, but the thing that you're building with, right? In StackLog, as we said, we're a supply chain security company. We care about everything that you use to build, right? And so this is part of it. And so something even multi-stage builds, Frisbee can detect these ones, and Frisbee image Dockerfile. Dockerfile, off we go, right? So in this case, we didn't need a comment because Docker actually allows you to specify the tag that you were using besides the SHA, but it shows what I'm trying to portray, right? So we try to be a little bit more thorough. We try to make people's lives easier and automate things. So yeah, I mean, that's all for this specific part of the demo. Jacob, what else do you want to bring up?
There was one thing I forgot in the beginning that was related to the actions. There was a person, Fabian Kemmel, I believe he works at Crossplane, but I'm not sure. Sorry if that's not true. But he actually did a bit of research and found out that despite the action spinning being a recommendation from GitHub, there's only about 2% of GitHub repositories that use workflows, that use actions and pin them. So there's a lot of work to do, and Frisbee just makes it easier. It's one command or one call of an API.
Yeah, and 2% is quite a worrying number. And that one of the things that it's actually interesting about it is that those are public repos, as far as I can tell, right? So we don't know what people are doing in their private repos, right? So we hope that this is something useful for anybody to start fixing their things. From experience, I will also say that in general, the type of manifest that you saw, like Docker files, Kubernetes YAMLs, stuff such as compose files, like people generally don't pin by digest either. So in very big deployments by very big companies, I've seen that folks don't do that either, right? So that's one of the things that we were trying to address.
I think one of the reasons that folks might not be pinning is that they might be afraid that if they pin, that's the version that they are using forever, right? And they will not get updates. But that's actually not true, at least for GitHub Actions. You might know better about images. But for GitHub Actions, things like Dependabot can still update the actions for you. You still need to be careful, because if somebody takes over that repo, you wouldn't know that this update comes from an evil person. But at least there is the manual step of you having to merge the dependency that bumps the SHA, as opposed to someone taking over that action, publishing an evil version with the same tag that you were already using in your workflow, and you just don't know.
Right, and it's exactly the same for container images, right? We have fantastic tooling nowadays that's free for folks to use, such as Dependabot or Renovate, and they both handle both floating tags for GitHub Actions and container images for different formats, but also pinned versions of it, right? So once you pin, the tool Renovate or Dependabot are both able to determine that there's a new release, and so they will create a pull request with the new SHA, right, or the new pinned release, they'll even update comments, which is something really cool, right? So I highly recommend people start adopting automatic dependency updates, because that benefits your project, that benefits your deployments, and you don't have to be scared about pinning, right? They already do that for you. So there's a lot of benefits in doing that. Now, the support for different formats will vary depending on the tool. So you want to research uh, depending on, do you need an Argo CD manifest or something different? What support do you get from the tooling? But there are things that you can do, right? So you don't need to be afraid. You're gonna be all right. And so hopefully, like this small little tooling that folks are creating, like us, or bigger companies such as Microsoft with Dependabot, like, are helpful to increase your security stance.
So, Oz, I have a question there.
Yeah.
If I'm a developer who's like doing this or trying to, or if I want to update, what does that update process look like? Because I see a SHA, and it's nice because it adds in the thing that says, oh, this was 3.2 dot something or whatever, and then I'm able to see it. But do I have to, as a developer using this, say, oh, I need to use version 4.1 now, we're ready to move to the next major version? Or can I use the tooling to just say, hey, update me to the next major version, and then pin the
That's a
SHA?
very good question. And that really depends on the policy that you configure and your preferences, right? But normally the way that this will look is that if you configure something like Dependabot by itself, you will have a specific version, and whenever there's a new release, you're going to get a pull request, right? So you can decide whether or not you accept the dependency update, right? And now for something like a container, or for something like a uh, GitHub action, you're going to have the little comment on the side that says the version that it's being upgraded. So you don't have to decipher that by yourself. I can even show, I mean, now that my
I'm
screen
really
is
curious what
showing.
it looks like here, like especially like locally, because the Dependabot was the first question I had, and then you answered it immediately. But I was also curious around the experiences. Does a developer use a tool like Frisbee to say like, hey, update this thing, or do they have to, like, if you're updating something? That's why I use the major version bump, because you might be like, yeah, I'm gonna update this on the
Yeah.
version 3 series, but now I want to move to version 4, and so like what does that process look like for somebody who's going to be moving, like, and all they have is a SHA in the old version? Do they have to go back and delete all their SHAs where they have that, and then put 4 dot whatever and then update the SHA, or is there a way that the tool can pick that up for you?
No, the tool already picks it up. You don't have to worry about that. So tools like Renovate and Dependabot already understand the checksums, right? So there's nothing extra you have to do. All that you have to do is run Frisbee on whatever uh, repository you want to run it in, and you merge that pull request, everything gets upgraded, and Dependabot and Renovate already know that they are now dealing with pin commits. Well, I mean, sorry, pinned references, and that's about it, right? It'll just happen by itself. There's
Yeah, and
nothing extra on your side.
if you configure Dependabot Renovate to also bump the major versions, then that comment that Frisbee puts in when it pins the actions, both Dependabot and Renovate will also change that comments. If you go to like V3 to V4, the SHA will change with the update, but also that comment that says V3 or V4 will change.
Hey, Oz, we had a comment on the stream about people are talking about like, well, what kind of code? Can you show an example of the code again so people on the stream can see like what the like the YAML file looks like, if
Oh,
you're
sure.
updating it, just so.
So this is the example of a YAML file that Frisbee would pin for you, which would look as follows, right? And tools such as Renovate and Dependabot are already able to decipher these kind of things with the relevant comments and update both, if that makes any sense.
It does. I'm just making sure we're answering those questions. Now,
No, for sure.
a follow up to this is, do people use tools like Frisbee or something else to do like a check in CI? So if I were well, I am a maintainer of various projects, but I think most maintainers, if they were to do this, they'd want to be able to check in CI if somebody added something new and make sure it's pinned to a specific SHA. like if they added a new step in a GitHub Actions pipeline and they're using a tag instead of a version, instead of a SHA. Is there a way to use, is Frisbee what you use to check for that and see if they're like run Frisbee and check if there's like a Git diff, or is there
Yeah.
something else like a built-in action people can use? Like what are some of the options available?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because we do have a Frisbee action that you could leverage, right? So maybe this is a link that I should copy somewhere here. But yeah, I mean, so basically we actually do have a GitHub action that leverages Frisbee, and it's actually able to, well, I mean, if you use it in your pipeline, it's able to detect and fix automatically whatever you need, right? But when you're talking about maintenance of open source projects or for organizations themselves, right, we're thinking about scale and adding an action. Let's say that we're talking about a really big organization and we try to add this action everywhere. That becomes a little tedious. So that's where another open source project that we're working in called Minder comes in, right? So this project takes repositories from whatever organization, right? I mean, as long as it's public, it'll take it, and enforces a set of rules for you to be able to know, am I complying with this rule? Say, like, are all my actions pinned, right? And it's actually able to fix that for you, right, automatically, so you don't need to worry about it. It also can block CI if needed for certain cases. So I can give a demo of that actually. Let's see.
Yeah,
Minder.
while Oz is starting the demo, the Frisbee action is a super new project. It's like 3 weeks old, I want to say. And right now, what the action does for you is pretty much what I was showing earlier in my short demo, that it looks at your current repository contents and pins those, but it cannot intercept the pull requests. So in your example, if somebody contributes a new action to your workflows, Frisbee is not going to flag that PR, and it's not going to fail CI on that PR. But once that PR is merged, the moment it is merged, or the moment Frisbee runs, like on a schedule or something, the Frisbee action is going to open a follow-up PR that pins the action.
All right. Yeah.
We're going to add the support for catching the PRs and failing CI on that, but we're not there yet. It's really like 3-week old project.
Right. So going into one of my personal projects here that I have still. If we look at this kind of pipeline, I mean, everything looks kind of fine, right? I mean, I check out the code, build the code and everything, but nothing is pinned, right? So I'd like it to be pinned. That would be fantastic. So here what I do, I have a couple of projects registered in Minder, right? I have this profile right here, Minder profile. And basically what this profile says that I want that for every repository that I have registered in my project, I want that the actions are pinned. Basically, we're using pin tags, except for this one, which actually doesn't accept pinning, right? There's some few exceptions that don't really work well with that, but let's not get into that as of now. And finally, we want to tell it remediate, right? So fix it for me if it's not already fixed. So Minder profile create, Minder profile, right? And let's see how we're doing. Minder profile status list. And it's pending. Mm-hmm. Oh. Minder of. Right. Demo effect. It's taking its sweet time.
I mean, this is what I always tell people when this goes wrong on this stream. If if you see the mistakes happen, that's how you know the demo's live.
Yeah, there we go. But anyway, so I tried it a bit earlier today, but then I did a lot of other stuff. So something that would have happened is that you would have gotten a commit right here that would have told you that well, it wouldn't have told you much. It would have just done it for you, right? So you would see that I was using checkout v3, and so it just pins it for you with everything that I need. And once I would merge this, which I could, I guess, right? Oh, I should have checked my pipeline. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it was just GitHub being a little bit slow. But I can just merge this. It's going to get evaluated again. And then I would just see a success, right? That it's passing. But of course, demo effect. And I'm not seeing that right now. So it is what it is. Of course, I had to go for the latest build. My hubris got the best of me. All right. Jacob, anything else that you want to add?
Just that, the difference between running something like Frisbee and running something like Frisbee through Minder is that, well, there's two things. One is that with Minder, you can run different policies. Like, it's not just that Minder lets you evaluate that one single policy of pinning your actions. There's a bunch of them. Like, you can say, I want all my repos to have a branch protection policy that looks like this, and then you just have it. The other is what Oz mentioned earlier, that you can do it at scale. Like, you don't have to, with Frisbee, because it's a command line tool and a library, you need to just go one by one and then push the changes yourself or open PRs yourself. Minder does that for you automatically. So fixing one repo is about as hard as fixing 1,000 repos.
Do we have any questions in the chat?
Nope,
Because
I
I
was just
think that's
giving it a
about all the
second to
content that we have. Yeah.
I was just checking. I got some good feedback. People said there's some awesome demos, so we're getting that feedback as well. But no questions as of yet. I did save up my questions so you would have them to answer as well. So, okay, we'll give people just probably another 30 seconds or so if you have any questions so that they come through. And then otherwise we can wrap up if you don't have anything, if you've gotten through all that content, I should say.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, Frisbee itself is a very nice and small, dedicated kind of tool, right? Following the Unix philosophy, do one thing and one thing only so that it's understandable. Well, in this case, I mean, we replace references with the pin checksum, right? So if you think about it that way, and it's overall just a good security practice all around, right? So we try to make lives easier for folks.
Okay, I don't think we're getting any more questions, so thank you very much, Jacob and Oz, for coming in. This has been great to see. It's really great to see, even like some of the new projects where you're like, hey, this came out 3 weeks ago. I mean, that is how cloud native technologies are made. Is people are like, I have this idea that uses something that's out there, and let me build something with it. So it's really cool to see that. So thank you so much for coming in. Are there any other invites or calls to action you have for anyone watching today?
Well, we check out Frisbee. We answer on Discord actually, so we have a Discord channel. Reach out if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, if you need any help. We're happy to help, right? So we just want to make
File
folks'
issues if
life
you run
easy.
into
Yeah,
problems.
file issues, right? Our documentation could be better, maybe. So that would be another place. I'm terrible at that. Sorry.
Yeah, and that sounds like the classic things that many projects need. As a fellow, open source project maintainer, all those are the kinds of things that these types of projects need. So feedback, use cases, all the documentation, all that kind of stuff is great to have. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in, and have a great day, everyone. And we'll see you all at the next Cloud Native Live.